So guys, in case you're familiar, Lauren Southern is currently over in New Zealand at the moment. She was supposed to be having a show, but apparently New Zealand doesn't have freedom of speech. Now look, obviously we'll get into all this. We'll get into the freedom of speech versus expression of freedom of speech, yada yada yada. But before we do that, I just obviously welcome Satellite of Discontent. Welcome.
Hello, everyone.
How are you, man? Good?
Good.
Yep, cool. Alright, so basically what was happening and what the breakdown is, and I've got a few articles here. New Zealand hostile to the views of Lauren Southern and Stefan Molyneux. Jacinta, I might be mispronouncing her name, Jacinta, whatever, Adrina. Now, this is the Prime Minister of New Zealand. But we'll get to that in a sec. So the main thing, what has actually happened? Lauren Southern was supposed to be having a event. I believe it was supposed to be today, wasn't it? Friday?
Yes.
Today? Saturday.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's Saturday here in Australia / New Zealand. Is obviously a couple hours behind us, but you get the idea. They were supposed to have an event today. The emails went out to say, this is the event, this is the venue, come one, come all, so to speak. Now, before they went through and arranged this event, they actually said to specifically, and this is something that Stefan and Lauren will get to in a sec, they specifically said to the event hoster, this is who we are, this is what we do, are you a free speech platform? His response was yes. This is a free speech centre, we welcome everybody. Now, within about an hour of that email going out and everybody everybody being told where this event was going to be hosted, who's obviously attending, he has since changed his mind. He is threatened for her staff to get out of the venue, otherwise he will have them arrested, and the event has been cancelled, postponed, whatever it may be, at this address. So at the end of the day, yeah, it's interesting. We're getting a little bit of background noise on your mic, man. But yeah, it's a little interesting that he's changed his tune when it comes to being free speech, not being free speech. But we'll get to all that in a sec. So New Zealand hostile to views of Lauren Southern and Stefan Molyneux. Prime Minister Jacinta Andrea, I might be mispronouncing, has said New Zealand is hostile towards the views of controversial alt-right speaker pair Lauren Southern and Stefan Molyneux, arriving in Wellington with a new baby, Nev, and her partner Clark Gayford. Miss Andrea said she didn't support the views of Miss Southern and Mr. Molyneux, and was proud of the reaction of many New Zealanders. Quote, I think you'll see from the reaction they've had from New Zealanders that their views are not those that are shared by this country, and I'm quite proud of that, she said. In a video on this YouTube channel, Mr. Molyneux declared New Zealand was hostile to free speech after the pair's speaking event was cancelled on Friday. Mrs. Aman responded on Saturday by saying, I think the New Zealand is hostile to their views. Look how they're here because there were no grounds to block them being here. That doesn't mean we welcome their views. Now, Immigration Minister Ian Lesgalloway, I might be mispronouncing, called the pair views repugnant in July, but they met immigration criteria and were granted temporary working visas. Immigration decisions may in no way condone the views expressed by the pair, which are repugnant to the government and run counter to the kind of tolerant views the vast majority of New Zealanders, Mr. Levi said. This is in Molyneux's video. Miss Southern said the event's cancellation was symbolic of what is happening in New Zealand and the crippling of free speech. The gig was called off at last minute by the owner of the power station on Friday. The pair had claimed the venue was initially enthusiastic to have them. Roughly 1,000 protesters gathered in Auckland, Ontario Square on Friday night, celebrating the cancelling of the event, which they said had nothing to do with freedom of speech. If I'm really honest, the two fascists helped make this happen because Auckland made it really clear tonight those views aren't right, said Tamiki Anti-Fascist Action spokeswoman Sina Bowen David. On Saturday morning, a small group of about 30 people gathered in Ontario Square to stand for freedom of speech. I do find that...
These two are actually pro-free market, which means they're pro-capitalists, which means they're not fascists. Yeah. But hey, what do I know? I'm not a reporter.
Yeah. Also, I'd like to challenge them. I'd like to actually see photos of these two protests that went on. I find it very interesting that only 30 people stood for freedom of speech, or what's that? That's their claim. I'd like to see that as a proof.
We'll find out soon enough. There'll be photos and videos soon enough.
And I'd like to see the roughly 1,000 protesters, and I'd like to know how many of them were paid protesters, but regardless. But yeah, at the end of the day, we do actually have... look, there's another article which basically says the same sort of thing. And we do have a bicycle video from Lauren Southern and Stefan Molyneux. But before we get into that, let's talk about New Zealand. So, New Zealand is like Australia. They do not have a guaranteed amendment of freedom of speech. They have what they call, and what we call, a freedom of expression. Now...
It's implied free speech,
Yeah, exactly. Now, the interesting thing, and I actually found this when I was doing a little bit of research, is, and I'll get the exact quote for everybody, but yeah, at the end of the day, like they said, there was no grounds to block them from coming into New Zealand, but at the end of the day, it seems like they tried their best to stop the freedom of speech happening. So, I don't know, man. What's your thoughts on this? Obviously, I think that the event was good to go. I'd say that the establishment was threatened, but badly threatened. Either protesters just calling the phones off the hook, probably some politicians doing the same thing. They just all sat back and waited for them to announce the establishment, and they probably had someone buy the ticket to get the email, and as soon as they got the email with it, they just went straight for the establishment. Yeah, this is just straight out of the playbook of the left. This is something that they will actually touch on in the video, and we'll get to that in a sec. So look, at the end of the day, I found that reference I was talking about. Everybody has the right of freedom of expression, including freedom to seek, receive, and impart information and opinions of any kind in any form. That is what it actually says in the 1990 states in Section 14. That's the Bill of Rights for New Zealand. I don't know if it's been changed since then. That was the latest thing I can find. But at the end of the day, they're blocking people from receiving the information. They're blocking people from imparting the information. And in any form means speaking events. This literally goes against their own Section 14 of the Bill of Rights Act for New Zealand.
I don't think it does, because, and this is me playing the devil's advocate thing, that because it is a private establishment, it doesn't break it probably breaks the law to call and make threats to the establishment.
Okay, yeah.
But then it doesn't break the law for the establishment to say, oh, well, no, you can't have it here. Okay, that's not breaking the law.
Yeah, okay, so sorry, my misunderstanding. Sorry, I didn't explain it very well. I was talking about illegal reasons for New Zealand stopping them from having the event at all. Yeah. I haven't even got onto the whole establishment part yet, but yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, if it is found that there's any kind of governmental link between the protesters, if the protesters did threaten the establishment, if there's any monetary link, then illegal activity did occur, I would say.
Yeah, well, even just threatening the establishment, even if it's not government linked, even just normal threatening of the establishment, that is illegal. And
yes, it is.
Yeah, and it's very interesting that this guy managed to flip so easily. He went from pro free speech to oh my god, you cannot have that here. I don't want anything to do with this.
Get the hell out. Yeah.
And this is something. Yeah, this is something that literally Stefan and Lauren have touched on, and we will obviously get to that in a sec. But at the end of the day, do you think that New Zealand should be able to do you think they should have their view or have their conference in New Zealand? Or do you think...
Of course.
Yeah, I mean,
what they could do is just send out another email and just have it in a public park. I mean, that's what I would do.
True, but then you wouldn't have the security.
That would be a problem, I suppose. The security side of it might be difficult. Maybe Stefan and Lauren don't want to spend that much. They'd probably make a loss on the event hiring enough security. I don't know.
Yeah, like how would you secure a park?
That's true. If they get together for a peaceful gathering and just do the event, and then you have cameras everywhere showing we're the ones being attacked by Antifa. They've come here and started this. That is actually positive for Lauren and Stefan, though.
Yeah, but if we lose Lauren, like my future waifu, and Stefan, my future best man, then...
Well, that's true. If they manage to kill them or hurt them in some bad way. Yeah, I know what you're saying.
I don't know if I would want to do it myself, but let alone these two with such high priority they are. But look, so we do have the video from Stefan in the My Circle. I can hear myself in your speakers. Have you got...
No, I've got everything muted.
Okay, it might be the headphones. But yeah, I was going to say... I have the My Circle link, and we'll play that for you, the people playing along now.
And the latest is that we had a venue all set up, and we paid. We had an agreement in place, and the venue owner knew who we were. There was no big surprises. And then very shortly afterwards, and I'm sure this is no coincidence, very shortly after we released where the venue was going to be, which we have to do late because of security concerns, within an hour or so, the venue owner was screaming at our people and telling them to get out of the venue, or he was going to have them arrested for...
So, obviously transformative reasons here, people. YouTube, Sky News, whatever it may be. That I find interesting. Less than an hour of the event being released, the guy has backflipped or changed. That I find very interesting. Do you have anything you want to add on that, or do you want us to keep going?
Yeah, no, keep going.
No.
Trespassing and so on, and so what transpired from the guy who's hosted Marilyn Manson and other, who says his venue is like a blank slate or a blank space where people can come, a big pro-free speech guy. What happened between when we released the name of the venue to when he's screaming abuse at us, clearly terrified out of his mind? That is the big question. What happened in that hour between us releasing the name of the venue and him calling us to cancel? If I had to put money on it, I guess he was threatened. And if that is true, then that means that it was the use or threat of violence in pursuit of political ends, straight up terrorism.
We've had overwhelming positive response of people supporting our free speech, wanting us to be allowed to give our opinions, even people who disagree with us saying we should be allowed to. And this is what's so shocking, is this venue owner, it was unlike many of the other venues we've done speeches at. He called us and said, absolutely, this is a free speech venue, happy to have you here. To a complete flip, to just a terrified man. Terrified, which means that even if it's not the majority of New Zealanders, and there was a poll recently that showed that the majority of people in New Zealand support our free speech, there is a violent and scary minority of people here that are willing to make threats and commit violence for the sake of shutting down free speech. And this is the question, will New Zealand let those people win? Will New Zealand let those people decide what the majority get to hear, what questions they get to ask, what speeches they get to attend? Right now, that answer is yes.
All right. So we also do have the Prime Minister's view on all this, but before we jump into that, so what's your view on all this, mate? What are yours?
So it's actually interesting. So from her perspective, the majority was actually on their side, whereas the Prime Minister's saying it's actually the majority against it. So there's clearly a he said, she said scenario here.
Yeah.
Well, she said, she said. Anyway.
Yeah, at the end of the day, sorry guys for distraction on the screen. But yeah, at the end of the day, obviously she's going to be biased when it comes to her own personal point of view. He's going to be biased. Lauren's going to be biased when it comes to her own polling data. Look, at the end of the day, obviously Lauren is going to be more interested in the right-wing politics and the right-wing news articles. And at the end of the day, the Prime Minister is going to be obviously more on the progressive left side of the argument with polling data. So it is possible they're both seeing different polls, playing devil's advocate, I suppose. But at the end of the day, I would like to think that majority of people actually support freedom of speech, that this isn't, a thing that you could, that you should stop. Like, I don't agree with everybody. I have different opinions, even on you. You and I have been having these little debates at night when we've been playing games. And, we generally will agree on things.
Yes.
Yeah, we'll agree on things like immigration and whatnot, but at the end of the day, there's certain things that you and I don't agree on. And I'd like to think, I know for me, for a fact, at the end of the day, I'd still go out afterwards and have a beer with you. So... at the end of the day, it's weird how, certain people just can't seem to get along when, they're like, it's like, how can you not, I don't know, it's just, I would like to support anybody's right to freedom of speech. I mightn't like it, and I'd like to think that people would do the same for me. Obviously, that doesn't seem to happen because, well, it's been shut down in New Zealand. I think this is a huge shock, and this will send shockwaves through New Zealand when people sit there and say, "Holy shit, we can't even go to Lauren Southern's event without having it shut down. This is ridiculous. This is insane."
Well, New Zealand actually has a bit of a history with this shocking stuff. I mean, the Kim.com stuff was, wow,
Yeah.
New Zealand seems to be the one that's really throwing waves out. And I can't remember at the moment. If maybe we could do a quick follow-up story later tonight. I do want to bring up something else about New Zealand as well. Then it was actually pretty big. It's a political thing also. I just can't remember the guy's name and the event and what it was, but I know this big thing happened, so I've got to go and look it up again.
Yeah, sure. We can do it later tonight or something, yeah. But all right, but we do actually have the response from the New Zealand Prime Minister and her interview. We'll play that through the MyCircle now. And then we'll do a quick talk on that, and then we'll probably wrap it up. So obviously we want to show both sides of the debate here. So we'll go through and we'll listen to what she has to say.
The latest is that...
Alright, just hit pause and then stop.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, then back it up, yeah.
Yeah, I added it a bit late, so... Yeah.
Yes. And now saying that New Zealanders are being hostile to free speech. What do you make of that?
I think we're hostile to their views. And look, they're here because there were no grounds to block them being here. That does not mean we welcome their views. Look, as I say, there was no grounds on which to block them from coming here. I think you'll see from the reaction they've had from New Zealanders that their views are not those that are shared by this country, and I'm quite proud of that.
All right, so that in itself I find very interesting. So she said that she's quite proud that they blocked the freedom of speech. That in itself is horrifically terrifying because she's the Prime Minister of New Zealand. But this is the feminist Prime Minister of New Zealand who had a baby 6 weeks ago and is already back at work. Because woman power. But regardless, but what I was going to say was just the fact that she's proud they block freedom of speech is insane. What they asked her, is this a case of free speech? And her response is, well, we didn't block them from coming, we just blocked them from talking about it or having their speech.
A distinction without a difference.
Yeah, it's like, Okay, but you do realize that freedom of speech is where people have the freedom to talk without those
Exactly.
blocks, right? Like, yeah. Yeah.
It is ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous. I mean, I was, and that of course there are going to be other reasons to it, like right-wing views that I see as she's not prime minister material. You know, from the progressive point of view and from the female point of view, I don't support it very well at all.
Yeah, I don't know. Look, at the end of the day, I just find this is insane. That you can't sit there and say this is not a matter of freedom of speech. We didn't stop them from having their freedom of speech. We just don't want them to have their freedom of speech. That's basically what she's saying. And
politicians say a lot without actually saying anything.
yeah, I was going to say what you didn't actually say is more important than what you actually said in this. And this is something that I even tweeted at her, quote, "We're not hostile to freedom of speech, we're just hostile to your freedom of speech. We allow your freedom of speech in New Zealand, we just don't allow you to have your freedom of speech." And that's basically
that's a very alt-left point of view. I only recently came into the alt-left terminology, so I wanted to use it. Yay! No, but the thing is, it's like there is a horseshoe theory in it, because the right will say, well, we wouldn't allow outsiders, and you just heard that earlier from a friend of mine.
Yeah.
We won't allow your freedom of speech in our country. This is our country. It's our citizens. Only our citizens get that. And so, from her point of view, it's the same thing, isn't it? The Prime Minister's point of view.
Yeah.
We want freedom of speech, just not for you.
Yeah. And I'll say now that the people on the alt-right who turn around and say, we don't want you to have your freedom of speech because they're outsiders, not mentioning names here, but I imagine they would also extend that to block certain races or religions or minorities from having freedom of speech even in their country.
Yes, that I have heard that mentioned before.
Yeah, I believe he even mentioned examples of that in that conversation that you and I were in with him. And this is where it gets very interesting, because right now the alt left are carrying on a lot like the alt right.
It is. I actually sometimes wonder if the horseshoe theory actually might have some merit. I don't entirely believe in it. It's not that accurate, but in some ways it can be.
I don't know. I tend to lean towards the horseshoe theory being a little more accurate than people like to admit it is, especially when they're on the alt-right, alt-left side of things.
Yeah, so when you get way over to the right and way over to the left, into this alt, territory, alt-left, alt-right, yes, the horseshoe theory seems to actually play out pretty nicely. But the more woke method of being a lefty or a righty is actually not very horseshoe at all.
Yeah, when
like
you get in
me versus you. Like me versus you in a debate, we don't act like horseshoe theory. No. But if you were to get, an alt-right and an alt-left, yeah, absolutely. It'd be two sides of the same coin.
Yeah, well, that's because I'm centrist and you're right. We're not the opposites. Yeah.
We're not opposites. We're just, you're there in the center and I'm off in the right over here. But I'm not like mind-blowing off to the right,
Yeah. But anyway, look, at the end of the day, I think this is absolutely disgusting. And I don't know I don't know what's going to happen with Lauren Southern. I'll search her Twitter account now while I've got you on the phone.
My guess is they're probably just going to move on to the next thing. If they can't do this show, they can't do this show, and I suppose people who bought the tickets are going to get their refund. I would hope so. Lauren, if you're listening, give the refunds. It's the only best thing you can do. And move on.
I don't know how... Yeah, I don't know how... Like, because Lauren would have had to fork out money for the hotel. She would have had to fork out money for the... I presume the venue is going to refund the money back.
They would have to, yeah. Venue would have to refund in full because the venue broke the contract.
Yeah, and I was going to say, at the end of the day, the fact is that she's gone through and they've paid money to have this event, and it's going to come out of
Yeah.
her own pocket.
The losses that Stefan and Lauren would lose is just in their flight and hotel.
Yeah.
The event, they would get the full money back from the event, plus deposits and everything.
But
But
yeah,
it sucks. It sucks when this stuff happens, and it has happened in Australia before. I don't. Did Milo lose an event? I think he lost one.
I don't think he actually went to New Zealand, did he?
No. He didn't go to New Zealand, but didn't he lose one of the events?
No, I think they all went through. In Australia, they did anyway.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I was up at the Brisbane one, or Gold Coast one actually, I think it was. And no, that went through, and the Sydney and Melbourne and all that went through, and as far as I know, he went to all of them. So, yeah, and I'll tell you now,
Maybe
guys,
Milo didn't go to New Zealand because he
no,
knew it was going to go bad.
yeah, he probably realised how much of a shit show it was going to be. And look, this is the interesting thing. I've been to this show with Stefan Molyneux and Lauren Southern. I've seen them in person. I've got an autograph book of both of them, and I got to wrap my arms around Lauren. But anyway, but what I was going to say was I don't think what she said on the night was very controversial. And now, unless the show is radically different than what she said in Brisbane, because I went up for that one, I don't think anything she said was terrible at all. In fact, I think Stefan might have been more controversial slightly than she was.
The thing is that to us it isn't controversial what they're saying. It's that the left has gone so batshit that to them it is highly controversial. It's like me listening to I find what the left says as what the, like when they talk about the other topics that they throw up sometimes, I'm just like shaking my head and disgust and getting pissed off about it. Yeah, to me, what they're saying is controversial and vice versa. But because we're off to the centre and to the right a bit, I mean, yeah, we don't find them. It's the Overton window thing. It's like what's outside of that is unacceptable kind of thing.
Well, I'll tell you what, they're not going to be very, very happy with my video that's going to be coming up. Okay, so a little bit of announcement, guys, a little bit of shameless plugging before we wrap it up here, and I'll get you to plug your stuff in a minute too. I have decided to go through probably once a month and upload a in-depth look at a certain topic, and holy shit, this one's going to probably roll a few people up. So that's all I'm going to say about that.
Well, I don't even know what it's about.
Actually, I told you last night.
So, okay then, sorry.
Yeah.
You have to remind me.
Okay, yeah, I'll remind you off here. But apart from that, guys, as for obviously satellite stuff, you want to plug your BitChute?
Sure, yeah.
Yeah.
BitChute, bitchute.com/SOD show.
Links obviously in the description below, guys. Obviously, you can follow us both on Twitter. Am I following you on Twitter, man?
I don't know. And for guys on the BitChute here, I'll be dropping the link in the description for Nonpartisan's channel as well. So
Yeah.
have a look at his channel, guys.
Yeah, apart from that, guys, obviously, look, let us know what your thoughts are in the comment section below. Obviously, as always, this is a discussion. We're not in an echo chamber or anything like that, obviously. Let us know what your thoughts are. Do you think New Zealand should have gone through and allowed Lauren Southern to speak? Do you think this is a case of freedom of speech? Or do you think they had a right for them to... Do you think there was any sort of shutting down the event? Do you think the government might have been involved in this, or do you think the guy was just received so many threats that he decided to can the event? Let me know. Do you agree with the Prime Minister? Do you think that they should be allowed to talk, or they shouldn't be allowed to talk, or whatever it may be? Let us know what your thoughts are in the comment section below. If this video has been helpful, please obviously smack a like. If you're new to the channel, welcome and subscribe. Apart from that, guys, I'll see you in the next demonetized video from YouTube. Have a great night and enjoy.